Ladies, gentlemen, President Mirziyoyev, President Samir Suluhu Hassan, Vice President Hang Zheng, ladies, gentlemen, it is an immense pleasure to see this august assembly, this room packed with people. President Mirziyoyev and I have just exchanged our views, and he said the room is packed, which is testimony to the interest caused by the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. And I would like to welcome all the participants and guests here. Russia and St. Petersburg once again host leaders of companies, businessmen, experts this year from more than 130 countries with a view to building business contacts and creating new contacts. Our moderator has just given us a very high bar to which we should rise up, and I'm going to talk about. But before we came here, she said that the atmosphere is very good, and it was thanks to the organizers. So at the outset, I would like to thank the organizers of this forum, everyone who participated in the organization process. Thank you. The unique nature, the attractiveness of SPIEF consists in this possibility of a frank dialogue on issues that are of interest to entrepreneurs, to whole industries and whole countries. And we're always open to those who are interested in working with other countries, those who stand ready to engage in mutually beneficial cooperation on equal footing. This approach, which consists in listening to one another, understanding the interests of one another, arriving at common solution, that is what harmonious path of development is all about. It also implies the opportunity to find solutions to the challenges the modern world is facing. We see that the energy markets are undergoing shocks. We see tensions provoked in certain regions. First and foremost, right now I refer to the Middle East. We see the short-sighted policies pursued by the European bureaucracy, which is accompanied by aggressive rhetoric and leads to further loss of Europe's position in the world economy. Moreover, it undermines regional as well as global security. As a matter of fact, the European elites are provoking chaos, and they are trying to plunge more and more countries into this chaos. These processes, they were not born of their own. This is the consequences of the fact that over the last decades, the world is undergoing the most profound structural transformation, which is not a transition from one stage to another of the cycle. The very paradigm of global development is shifting. What did we have in the past? What I want to draw your attention to is the fact that for decades, global development model was based around a restricted number of financial centers, technological solution, insurance and logistics hubs, rating agencies, as well as reserve currencies. And this architecture was portrayed as universal, as something that fits allegedly everyone, and hence allegedly neutral. But as a matter of fact, it was increasingly often used as an instrument for political pressure and unfair competition when settlements, technology, logistics, and sometimes even access to information can be switched off in the blink of an eye in order to punish those who choose to act in their own national interests. Basically, this was a deliberately created system of dependence, or system for taking someone else's resources out of them. Right now, the overwhelming majority of countries see that, and this is something that is seen by entrepreneurs, banks, industrial companies, farmers, as well as transportation companies. They see that their investment plans to develop their business can face serious risks, that the external infrastructure they use can be turned against them. That is why countries begin to pursue their own technological solutions, building their own supply routes as well as institutions. Russia feels the full brunt of these changes. the pressure against our country remains, and yet the space for maneuver is growing. We see new partnerships, new financial and technological solutions. We're exploring more promising markets. Thus, Russia believes that the global changes are not just a threat. They also carry enormous opportunities, and to seize them, we're trying to act swiftly and pragmatically. I will reiterate, this current turbulence goes back to the fact that from a vertical hierarchical model which served the interests of a very small group of countries, the world is transitioning to a distributed, more comprehensive multipolar system. What am I referring to? The structure of growth is shifting in favor of new centers of development and the countries of the global south. Colleagues, you see that very well, and this is not a declaration. This is objective realities, because the countries I'm referring to see a growth of population. They see the birth of middle class, a surge in their industry, an expansion of their domestic market, which means new cities are being built, just as roads, ports, energy, and digital grids. They built their financial, educational, and scientific centers. I would like to say in that regard that the world is becoming more equitable, fairer, because economic growth is extending to a growing number of countries, giving billions of people who used to be on the periphery of the global economy new opportunities. Importantly, new centers of growth want to select their trajectory of development on their own. They want to get greater share of value added, build their own logos and standards as well as competences. So if you look at the global GDP dynamics of the last 5 years, you will see that almost half of its annual growth, 49%, is accounted for by BRICS countries, whereas the contribution of the so-called Group of Seven is estimated at 18%. Just for your information, I can tell you that in 2021-2025, the global economy grew on average by 4.1%. Annually, 2% accounted for by BRICS and just 0.8% accounted for by the G7. Right now, the share of BRICS in the world GDP based on purchasing power parity stands at 40%, whereas the G7 share is less than 29%. So BRICS has already overtaken the G7, and it did so back in 2020, but this gap is increasing. This gap is expected to grow in favor of BRICS. But what are the sources explaining this process? This is due to the fact that BRICS is going to grow at a steadily greater pace. The pace is greater right now, but this trend is going to persist. The G7 is going to grow at best by 1.1% per year, whereas BRICS nations are going to grow by more than 4%. Colleagues, we are not the ones who say that. This is the World Bank and the IMF that are saying that. International institutions have to state this. Of course, it is more interesting to go there where the development is more dynamic. There is a possibility for building your production and selling your products, and that is why the center of the global trade as well as the financial system is going to shift. It is already shifting, and this trend is going to persist. For many years, most flows of trade, capital, and information were going through a handful of Western infrastructure hubs. Even when a good was flowing from one Eurasian country to another Eurasian country, the settlements, logistics, insurance, arbitration were all based on the institutions of third countries, which generated additional costs and created political dependence. Right now, international trade is becoming increasingly efficient. We see growth of supplies without intermediaries. Settlements and national currencies are expanding. New corridors are being set up. In Eurasia, I refer to North-South corridor, Trans-Arctic transportation route, as well as links via the Caspian Sea, Central Asia, the Black Sea, and the Middle East. All of these projects and logistics routes are the emblem of modern development as well as future development. To cite an example and to show that the global trade system ceases to be centered around the West, I can say that over the last 25 years, BRICS' share in the world trade in goods has more than doubled. Last year, BRICS accounted for almost 25% of the world export, and this indicator continues to grow steadily, inexorably, just as intra-BRICS trade is growing, and it has exceeded $1 trillion per annum. A special role is taken on by the connected countries that are linking together markets, technologies, financial flows, and the culture of doing business. And I'm not just referring to simple transit, carrying goods over certain territory. The most important thing is to ensure trust, logistics, settlements, legal clarity and technological compatibility. And this panel discussion is attended by the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan, whom I would like to welcome once again. I would like to thank you for being here with us on this panel. You are at the helm of the country, which is one of the centers of economic growth. Uzbekistan's population is growing rapidly. It is pursuing industrial plans, improving its agricultural as well as energy potential. Its domestic market is growing too. At the same time, Uzbekistan acts as an important link between Russia, Central Asia, South Asia, China, and the Middle East. When your individual development is harmoniously complemented by advantages of links to other centers of multipolar world. Well, these examples are going to be increasingly numerous, and this fully applies to another guest of ours from Tanzania. Once again, welcome, Madam President. Tanzania plays a similar role in East Africa. There's another important trend I would like to point out. The global trade architecture is drifting away from its original principles of the World Trade Organization, starting from the beginning of the 21st century. The number of bilateral, regional, as well as mega-regional trade arrangements has more than quadrupled. Why is this happening? The erosion of the World Trade Organization was set off by the very authors of these organizations, the Western nations to be more precise. When it benefited them, they promoted the WTO. They invited other countries to join, but once the West started to lose in this competition, universal common rules for the trade introduced by the WTO lost their interests to them. They became more of a burden. And that is when they turned to unilateral restrictions and so-called sanctions, and thus the Western countries basically switched off the WTO mechanisms, undermining trust in them. And once there is no trust, the institution can no longer function properly. And that means the businesses, the countries will have to find another solution, and they are doing that in the form of bilateral as well as multilateral trade arrangements. I said that before. Sanctions and basically the theft of Russia's international reserves has had an irreversible effect on the positions of the world currencies, namely the US dollar and euro. This is an evident fact we have to recognize. Right now, all countries without exception, and I would like to underscore that, just as Russia can instantaneously lose access to their legitimate assets denominated in USD or euro, they can also lose access to the Western financial and payment infrastructure. You and we understand that this is all about unfair competition. There can be different pretexts to start that, and they will always find something. In our case, this is the conflict in Ukraine. This can also be the conflict in the Middle East, conflicts in Africa, or the attitude towards the LGBT community. You can find fault with anything, but the basic rationale is basically unfair competition. Another thing that undermines trust in the West is the deplorable state of their public finance. I refer to high public debt and high budget deficit. The Eurozone public debt rose to 81.7% of the GDP in 2025. The worst indicators, they are in Greece 146, Italy 137, France 115, Belgium 108%, whereas in Russia it's 16.4% only of the GDP. Well, it's floating a little bit. Yesterday I spoke about that meeting the heads of information agencies, news agencies. Some experts say it's 15.8, but the figures are incomparable. The deficit of the euro budget in 2021 stands at 3.1% of the GDP. Poland has a maximum deficit of 7.3%. Belgium has a deficit of 5.2%. France, the deficit of 5.1%. The U.S. has 5.9%, whereas in Russia the budget deficit is 2.6%. Maybe by the end of the year it will have risen a little bit, but still it will be inferior to the budget deficit in other advanced economies. This situation is fraught with the possibility of a surge of inflation, which happened back in 2021, 2022, when just in 2 years the prices in the Eurozone and the US grew by 14%. And that means that countries of the world are decreasing their assets. In the West, they're transitioning to payments in national currencies. They're making wider use of alternative payment systems, increasing the role of digital financial assets as well as the digital currencies of their central banks. Russia is mostly using national currencies in its trade contacts with our leading partners. The share of ruble in our exports stands at 65% or so almost 2/3. I would like to underscore that the world needs a modern, agile and responsible financial architecture without any risks of restrictions or barriers, rather with incentives for sovereign development. These instruments have to decrease costs, speed up settlements, increase access to funding. And of course, we have to make sure there is no tax evasion, no fraud, no money laundering. This is something that has to be in our spotlight always. Historically, the West has been seen by other countries as the source of technological development. But right now, we see some fundamental shifts in this context. Over the last 25 years, the BRICS countries have significantly increased their high-tech export. Right now, it has risen to more than 1/3 of their global supplies, which means that the global technical leadership is shifting. This is a gradual process, and yet it is already ongoing. Now, our strategic partner, China, has most patents in artificial intelligence. Incidentally, Russia also has very good, promising advancements there. Let's give a round of applause to the Vice President of the People's Republic of China, whom we would like to welcome. Another key partner of ours is India, which is one of the leading players in the IT industry. It accounts for a significant share of the global software market. Russia also ranks high in the implementation of digital platforms such as trading marketplaces, solutions in finance and urban services, healthcare, as well as education, which help improve the quality of life of our citizens in Russia and beyond, in dozens of countries where they are vying successfully with similar solutions from abroad. We're also leaders in nuclear. More than 80% of construction processes in NPPs in the world market are conducted with the participation of Rosatom, more than 80%, which is a very significant figure. We have very good engineering as well as technical groundwork in managing water and energy resources, which is gaining an increasing attention in Asia, Africa, and on the world in general. I believe colleagues participating in the panel discussion will agree with that. It is evident that the global transformation is mostly due to technical progress. Experts believe there are 3 key technologies for today and for tomorrow that are capable of transforming the lives of our citizens, how our business is being done, and how the government is operating. I refer to artificial intelligence, which allows processing big chunks of data and making the best solutions in almost all fields. Another technology is autonomous systems, which can radically increase labor productivity and transform whole industries. And third, platform-based solutions, which allow market participants to work directly in real time and autonomously to exchange information and to conclude deals. Experts and scientists believe that the countries and groups of countries that have their own set of technologies in AI, autonomous systems, and digital platforms will become centers of sovereignty in a multipolar world. Moreover, without these technologies, real sovereignty is going to be unachievable. I would like to underscore the technological base is of paramount importance to countries with big population, vast territories, and unique cultures. These countries can't act as simply consumers of solutions offered by someone else. Otherwise, they risk becoming subject to foreign control via foreign platforms. And the question is how these platforms are going to be used. So big countries, two civilizations, are facing a historical choice. Either they come up with their own platforms and technological systems, or they are relegated to the digital periphery. And one should not be laboring under any delusion. First, foreign services can be very convenient, but then, sooner or later, you will see what the price of this dependence is gonna be. Russia has learned its lesson. We saw that certain suppliers of software left the market. We saw payments blocked. We saw how politics interferes within commercial relations. That is why we're going to strengthen our critical infrastructure, and we will only cooperate and interact with those partners that honor mutual reciprocal obligations and commitments. We have this experience with the People's Republic of China for many years. China is Russia's strategic partner, a genuine one. Our economic cooperation covers almost all fields, from high-tech to transport to mechanical engineering to energy. Distinguished friends, as I said, the global leadership in the world economic ties is conditional on whether the country can ensure its own sovereignty. I wouldn't be exaggerating if I say that this race for sovereignty has started, has kicked off, and it's gaining traction. We're not just talking about the capability to oppose external pressure and defend national interests. This is about the quality of the government, the economy, and society. Sovereignty implies being smarter and being stronger. That means being able to better manage your resources, to better invest, including in your technical development. I will highlight that genuine sovereignty requires efficiency. We can't say that we are sovereign, and that is why we can afford to be expensive, slow, and inconvenient. Quite the contrary. In each and every field, we have to act the best with the greatest efficiency, producing better, increasing the income of the government, business, and citizens. In difficult environment, Russia continues to reinforce its sovereignty rather than being isolated. It expands its circle of partners. It's true that the economic dynamics is moderate, and we'll probably get back to that, but I would like to remind you about the task fixed before the government starting from next year. We need to resume steady growth of our economy. We can only do that if we increase capital expenditure, launching a new investment cycle. In 2021-2024, investment growth in Russia was almost 38% in real terms. Last year, of course, there was a certain drop. I would like to draw your attention to the following fact. The launch of the new investment cycle is the key task of the economic authorities, whereas growing the investments is the most important KPI. It's important that economic growth should be well balanced. It should be based on domestic demand and combined with further reductions in inflation. And inflation has slowed down significantly, and it keeps going down. I think I mentioned that inflation in this year is expected to be around 5.2%. Colleagues and I are in regular discussions about the economic agenda, and I would like to point out that the industrial output, the GDP, and consumer activity in Russia, all of that is now in the black.